In New York goes inside the numbers on Wall Street and with the U.S. economy. But we begin with correspondent Kristen Fisher live on the North Lawn. Good evening, Kristen.
Good evening, Brett. President
Some
Trump.
analysis on the economy from Susan Lee of Fox Business in New York. Good evening, Susan.
Good evening, Brett. The stock markets rallied after one of the biggest surprises in labor market history. Instead of losing 8 million jobs, the U.S. economy added over 2.5 million. That helped propel the Nasdaq to a record high. The S&P 500 within 1% of going positive on the year, while the Dow crossed 27,000. Not only the jobs reports, but Wall Street liked the talk of more government money for the economy.
So we're going to be asking for a payroll tax cut. We'll be asking for additional stimulus money because once we get this going, it'll be far bigger and far better than we've ever seen in this country. We're looking at doing something in terms of an incentive with taxes. It could be deductions. It could be something else. But we'll be announcing it pretty soon.
America's biggest company, Apple, hit record highs Friday, along with shares in Home Depot, beating down travel stocks like airlines rallied. American Airlines up 75% over the past week. Boeing is up over 40%.
There's no question the stimulus, that line, a payroll tax cut, talked about, rumored, but he threw it in there again, and that added some fuel to the fire.
Stock markets hitting new highs despite the nationwide protests this week. Historically, there has been a disconnect between what investors focus on and what happens across the rest of the country. For instance, in 1968, the week after the tragedy of Martin Luther King, the S&P 500 rose over 2%, also up the week after the Rodney King ruling, and Wall Street trading on the reopening instead this year in 2020. Now, despite the positive surprise in the jobs market last month, the average Wall Street economist is still predicting the U.S. economy to shrink by at least a third in the year's second quarter from April to June, but may be encouraged now to predict a faster recovery in the back half of this year. Brett?
Susan Lee in New York. Susan, thanks.
Susan.
Neil, blowout jobs report, blowout day on the stock market. The economy adding 2 million jobs in the month of May instead of losing 8 million. Maybe one of the biggest surprises in labor market history, and that helped rally stocks with the Nasdaq hitting record highs. As you mentioned, the S&P 500 within a hair, a whisker of being positive on the year. And who would have thought this would be possible given the week's protests and the ongoing coronavirus spread? Now, the beaten down travel stocks turning around. Take a look at the airlines. American Air up 75% on the week. We saw similar gains for the likes of United, Delta, and Southwest. Also, check out Boeing, the plane maker, one of the biggest contributors to the Dow's rally. Boeing up 40% over the past 7 days. And financials, like the banks, they do well when there's less concern about the economy. And they also do better when the 10-year Treasury yield goes up. And that usually happens when there's less risk in the economy. Now, the past few weeks, as more states start to reopen and signs the U.S. might be restarting, that's been driving money out of the high-flying tech stocks and more into these so-called value plays, stocks that haven't done as well and trading at cheaper levels. But today, money was going everywhere, including into technology, and Apple hit a new record high. Microsoft, Nvidia, the other growth plays that also got some bids as well. Now, the S&P 500 had its best 50-day performance in history from the depths of the coronavirus sell-off close to the end of March. And Neil, that was the shortest bear market in history. What a day.
What a day indeed. What a week. All right. Thank you, Susan Lee from Fox Business Network, which if you don't get